when I'm able to do all the things that I do in one place, I just feel so happy. I feel so, so, so very happy. It's just returning to the living room shows that I used to make when I was a kid. You know, it's that same feeling. So yeah, there's been so much joy, like so much joy that it's almost impossible to count all those moments.
Welcome, friends. I'm Kristen Martin, and this is Torches. Today we have the multi-talented Eisa Davis. Eisa is an award-winning actor, writer, singer, songwriter, working on stage and screen, uptown, downtown, and in between. I'm really excited to have this conversation with her. Welcome, Eisa.
Thank you. Thank
Yay.
you.
So how did you come to be in downtown performance?
Oh, I mean, that's the $1 million question, because in a way it feels that you're just drawn to that kind of aesthetic from your own artistic inclinations, you know, and in some ways it feels like you don't even have control over those, you know. I think I just was always really attracted to smart art. And that just came from reading literature and poetry and listening to really incredible music from a very, very young age. My grandmother started me reading and writing when I was 2. I just got interested in doing theater like the monologues from For Colored Girls, for example, you know, doing poetry as theater, something that I did in the Black Repertory Group in Berkeley, California, where I grew up. And then also in high school, I did this absurdist play called Out at Sea by Sławomir Mrożek. And in college, just got very into Genet and Artaud and Albee, and did sort of an obscure Albee play called Tiny Alice. And also was a choreographer for some really out original student musicals. And, you know, so I just was really interested in art that, and still continue to be, I'm interested in art that is about breaking the limitations of how it is that we are expected to think. And so coming to New York, the first plays that I was in was a David Greenspan play at Here in 1995. And also that same summer I did Sarah Schulman play at Westbeth. So I feel like I just kind of got kicked out the door, you know, into this particular kind of aesthetic and outlook. And it never felt to me that it was a place that, you know, was a confining place, you know. It always felt that it was a place where you could just discover and explore, and just being part of this incredible tradition of off-Broadway theater. Again, you know, the very first equity play I ever did was an Adrienne Kennedy play called June and Jean in Concert, and she was my very first playwriting teacher in college.
Beautiful.
Yes,
That's so circular.
So exactly, and getting to work with Talking Band, for example, in a play of theirs called Belize. That's just a few of the entry points, I think, into downtown performance. It feels like it's something that's just been part of me since I started making anything or expressing anything, is that particular kind of aesthetic.
So is that the kind of core value or philosophy that centers your work, or is there a different core value that centers you as a maker?
I think it has to do with what I was saying about limitations and feeling that sense of liberation from those confines. I think that's the thing that is driving my work. I think that's the engine, is just always trying to find how it is that the notions that we have about each other as human beings that are provided to us by our various oppressions and societal mores, how those can be things that we are able to interrogate and examine and blow apart in work, in art. I think that's the thing that I'm always looking for, and I'm always trying to find different ways of doing that in my own work. Just how can I destabilize these notions that feel that they keep us in a smaller place in the way that we think about ourselves and the way that we think about each other. And I just always am opening. I want to keep opening and expanding that, like, bigger and bigger and bigger.
And as a multi-hyphenate artist, do you feel sometimes that people try to categorize you and that limits where you're wanting to go? And how do you work against that?
I get that question a bunch.
Then you don't have to answer
And
it
I
if you
just,
don't want to.
but it's funny. It's just that I still feel like I have to explain myself, but it's just like, but why? You know, right? It's just, you do all of these different things and they all feed on each other. I need the introversion of writing, and I really need the extroversion of performing. Like, they feed on each other so, you know, symbiotically. And if I don't have one, then the other, like, starts to feel like a confine. And so I just always need to have that balance. It's like an equilibrium that my body can actually feel. Like, I can feel if there's one that's being leaned into more than the other, and then I actually will feel like unhealthy. So yeah, it's not even about like categories for me. It's just about nutrients.
Nutrients. I
Nutrients.
love it. Could you describe a moment of pure joy in your work?
Yeah, I think that I want to always be doing things that bring me that. So it's always there. I mean, it's a larger spiritual practice though, which is that if I'm not grateful for the breath that I take when I wake up in the morning, if I don't feel that alone as a deep source of joy, then I'm in trouble. You know? So it's that. It's always checking into that, just the miracle of being in a body and having senses and having the long cultural traditions and having science and having community and nature. And so all of those things provide a joy that's there, that's just default, you know? And then I think that I don't do things unless there's going to be a lot of joy in it. And now that doesn't mean that, you know, I haven't taken on, you know, like your jobs that you've done in order to make money. You know, it's like I definitely have waited tables and I definitely have temped. And then I remember at one point I did commercials, you know, which I never thought in my life I would ever do because I was forbidden from singing them in the house when I grew up. You know, it's just like, this is sheer capitalist evil. Like, we will not have it in the house. And yet, you know, doing that like Snickers commercial allowed me to have enough time to write and do theater that was going to pay me like $2 or negative money. So I just bring that up to say that, yeah, there have been some times that are supposedly in the arts where I may not have had much joy and actually may have hidden. I remember that, like, doing that in a commercial, just where I was like, I'm going to get paid the exact same amount if I act or if I kind of hide. And I was like, why don't I just hide so like nobody can see me? And so I can't see myself in this. But no, I would say like the moments of pure joy are the moments when I am able to put together all of the things that I do in one room. I just finished a run at Here Art Center of the Essentialisn't, and that is a piece that I had been developing, and it had a lot of different iterations over the years. And it's a piece that I direct and am performing in and have written text for and have written music for and sing in. And when I'm able to do all the things that I do in one place, I just feel so happy. Got to do that in a play of mine called Angela's Mixtape. It's just returning to the living room shows that I used to make when I was a kid. That same feeling. There's been so much joy, like it's almost impossible to count all those moments.
Well, that was a really extraordinary show. I was lucky to get to see it. And one of the things that you talk about in it is, can you be Black and not perform? Mm-hmm. So how does your identity inform the work that you're making? Mm-hmm. That piece was all about that. But yeah. I think it's also been in other works of yours. So,
yes, yeah. Yes. Well, there's a question of identity and there's a question of cultural tradition. And I come from a series of wide cultural traditions, and sometimes not all of those are going to fit into what people think of as my identity. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking about kind of blowing apart these different notions of what it is to be a Black woman, for example, cis-het Black woman, I always want to be able to offer that as a possibility to an audience, is to say, the thing that you may think you know about someone who's in a body like mine may actually not be what I am or what others who are in that same body are. And that's a life or death question. Mm. It's really important to be able to move past what those received notions are.
Yes.
That's the reason why so many violent encounters take place, is because there's a particular story that you have about the being in front of you and what that dynamic might be. And so it's really crucial to me to be able to talk about identity freely, and again, joyously, and also critically, because I know that there's a sense of imprisonment that can actually happen, not only for someone like me as an artist, but someone like me in life, because of these particular ways of thinking, that of course come from slave culture, that come from gender oppression, Yeah. And so I'm always really interested in, like, I don't ever want to be preaching, and I hate being sermonized too. I just cannot stand that. I'm like, bleh, bleh, don't do it. I'm interested in people and concepts and just various kinds of ways of thinking that are systematized, and just seeing like, oh, maybe there's a little bit of a wedge in there, or just like a little fissure, like a little crack, a little way, a tension, and I can just kind of collapse that with the work, and just have a dialogue with both what the expectation is and then what the possibilities are.
Yeah, you've also spoken about the expectations being placed on people of color. Mm-hmm. And how have you interacted with or worked against that in institutions that you've worked with, in other artists that you've worked with audiences?
I know. In some ways I kind of like was a little slippery and was like, didn't even want to talk about that, because it's this really difficult question, right? Because, there's the work that you're making. Mm-hmm. And you always are wondering, is the work good enough? Is the work in a particular kind of space that audiences might be interested in, So those two questions are there for you as an artist. And then, of course, you're wondering if you're going to fit into whatever any particular gatekeeper has in mind about those, right? I feel like there have been a lot of times, and I think this is the case when I look over what my body of work has been. There's a very particular way that I work and think that isn't particularly popular, you know, or doesn't necessarily fit into what it is that people are programming. And I think it does have to do, again, specifically with, you know, what identity is for me and what culture is for me. But I'm the artist I am, and I can't change that. So,
and we don't want you to change that.
So yeah, it's just been this, it's often been a very painful process of feeling just, you know, not valued, you know, when the work that I make isn't something that, again, fits into or slots into what a particular institution expects of me, right? So it's like the work is actually, like you said, interacting with the kinds of interactions that I'm having with institutions, you know. But I mean, yeah, it just sort of gets to a point, and I think I learned that pretty early on, that I couldn't make my work be anything but what it was. And I had that experience in grad school where I wrote a play, and my teacher, who's passed now, didn't understand it, didn't understand the aesthetic. It was a play about hip hop. It used a lot of hip hop aesthetic in it.
This is before Angela's Mixtape?
This is before Angela's Mixtape.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a play that eventually became a full length called Umkovu, which is about this hip hop artist whose label is trying to kill him in order to boost sales. Oh. So there's a lot of parody in it, but it also really was thinking specifically about the way that, you know, violence is utilized as a way to monetize. And so I wrote it in this very ritualistic format. And my teacher didn't get it, didn't understand it in that form. And wanted it to be much more of a, you know, like, let's walk through this particular MC's life. You know, this happened, wanted it to be more chronological. And so this is my teacher, and I really admired his work. And I said, okay, let me try and structure it in the way that he's asking me to. So I did it, and I finished it. I pressed print, and I walked out onto the street, and I felt like I was actually being choked. Like I felt my breath leave me. And I said, okay, wow, so this play actually is telling me, don't kill me or I'll kill you. If you kill me, I'll kill you. And so I remember leaving town. I left New York and I went to Mendocino County, to that land that inspired my play Bulrusher, a place that is just so sacred to me. It's my favorite place in the world. And I went there and I rewrote the play again, and it still ended up in this ritualistic structure. And I just had to tell my teacher, this is what the play is, and you may not like it, and I may not graduate, but this is what it is, and I can't not write it in this way. And so, you know, I did graduate, but I know that is the thing that happens again and again for me, is that I just have to really stand behind what those impulses are, regardless of whether or not it actually is going to receive the response that I would like, or the approval that I would like. And, you know, yeah.
And that's risky. And you're someone who likes to take risk. I have a great quote from you. You said, I always try to something that feels like doing a Simone Biles double axel triple flip. Failure's not failure if you're doing your best. Part of the gig is falling on your face, then getting back up and continuing to try. So I love that. And I think that is so true about what we have to do in our field.
Yeah.
What's a big risk that you've taken?
I think just doing this at all is a big risk, right? I mean, really being an artist is a huge risk. And then I think, again, you know, I know if I look at the work that is, again, commercial or, you know, produced a lot, I know exactly what kind of story to make, how to structure it, what kind of gotchas and what kind of twists, and, you know, how to do it. Like we've seen it, we know it. Like we all have that kind of savvy, but that's not what the artist Damon, right? That little duende, right?
Yeah.
In me wants to do.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that risk is just standing behind the art that feels that it has to come out. And I think, you know, I think, again, if you're really, really interested in the art form, then you're trying to contribute to its evolution. And you're trying to look for new forms. So that's something that I have really been interested in. And I spent a good part of my early years in New York, in 20s and early 30s, my 20s and early 30s, really looking at hip hop as a form for theater. And was part of the Hip Hop Theater Festival, and also thought a lot about poetry as a form that can be inside of theater or make theater. And again, with Adrienne Kennedy as my mentor, as well as teacher, that's what she calls her plays. She calls them poems. Right. There's this way in which I'm really interested in taking the various kinds of urgent folkloric forms that are around, forms of grassroots popular culture, and seeing how that really can revitalize what it is that we think of as theater. I really think of theater as and performance as, you know, something that is a mother art form, right? It just holds everything in it. So there are so many things that can be theatrical, so many things that can be performance. And anytime we get stuck in thinking, oh, it has to be just this, I think that's exactly the moment when you say, no, I'm going to inject it with something that, you know, just feels a little bit like maybe it doesn't belong, or it's sort of out of that particular world. Just throw it in there and just see what happens, you know?
With your activist upbringing and family, how did you end up choosing art as your means of resistance rather than politics or activism? Yeah.
Again, I don't think it was a choice at all.
Well,
I think
I thought of it just now because you said the thing about the mother art, the mother form.
Yes. Well, my mother, my stepfather, my mother loves art and culture, period, and just took me to everything. And then my stepfather, whom she married when I was about, he is a filmmaker and made really incredible films inside of the LA Rebellion, including Charles Burnett and Julie Dash and Haile Gerima. So he was introducing me to all of these incredible independent and foreign films, you know, from when I was very young. And my grandmother just made sure I not only was reading and writing it too, but also was getting my piano lessons and learning from the organist at the church and singing. And and my mom would go to dance class all the time, and she would always take me to her dance classes. She would go almost every day, you know, it's just a very physical sort of embodiment to her life. Even though she was a civil rights attorney, she was dancing, right? And there's that Jung quote about how the repressed desires of the parent are the most powerful influence on the child. There's a way in which I think my mom is an artist inside, and that those inklings just kind of, came out in me. And so, yeah, I think because they all loved culture, and my aunt talks so much about cultural work being a form of dreaming, a way to dream the world forward, and that often the kinds of political visions that we have can come directly from the work that is being made by poets and novelists and artists in the theater and artists in performance and musicians, and that we, in our way of actually having as our responsibility and as our job to think freely, can think about a world that we might want to live in, and create that through our work. So I think I just was always in veneration of the arts, just like they were. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, if they love that, then maybe they'll love me if I'm in the arts. So, yeah, like I said, living room shows and just playing piano. And I also, I saw a kind of theater in my mom in the court. The first time I saw her in, giving an argument or interrogating someone on the stand, I couldn't believe the way she was speaking legalese. I just thought, what a cool language. What a great dialect, like how this is cool. And I think that's a huge reason why I became interested in becoming a playwright, was being able to hear her eloquence, my aunt's eloquence, and wanting to find a way to create worlds where people could speak with this heightened language. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to become a lawyer, but I wanted to learn, if I could, to be a ventriloquist of someone who was a character that was a lawyer, or being in mock trial, for example, as a kid in high school and college was a way for me to learn that heightened language, So I think that I find a kind of personal politic inside of the work, and I think politics is not really the way that they would even describe the work that they do. I think that they would say that they are activists outside of a political system, but that everything that they do has a political import, and that everything we do, all the choices that we make, have that as well. So yeah, I think I didn't choose this. It just sort of is the way that I carry my own family tradition forward.
I love that it's not a binary. It's not an either or. It's that these things are threaded together. And I know you talk about braiding too in your work. So it made me think of that. Because I feel like a lot of times people think about the arts as the icing on the cake of protest. They don't think of us as central to the idea making around protest and around change and around activation. There's this separation, especially in a lot of modern protest stuff now, where we're brought in at the end. We're not at the table when the conversations are happening. And so I really love that wholeness that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how Kendrick Lamar was used in Black Lives Matter protests, or you think about a Nina Simone and like Mississippi Goddamn, or you think about the way that magical realism as a literary form, again, can help us to imagine ways out of the particular circumstances that we're living in. And I think that, if we pay attention to art that is very engaged and very conscious of the circumstances that we are in, if you're reading an Octavia Butler, or you're taking that moment to say, okay, there's something that's happening in these works that allow me to see the world in a way that I never could before. And that, I think, is exactly what it is that we're trying to do when it comes to being a good neighbor, a good global, I don't want to say citizen, but a good global member,
Yeah, it's all speculative. We're helping imagine a different future, a different way of being.
Yeah.
For you, how do you balance experimentation with craft? How do you think about those things in conversation with each other?
Yeah. Craft is, if you're lucky, something that you develop with just the hours and hours, the thousands and thousands of hours of work and collaboration. And I remember that my one of my teachers, a different teacher in grad school, said, it's going to take you 10 years to learn how to write dramatic action. And I was like, you're kidding. That's too long. What do you mean? And I understood what she meant after 10 years. I really got it. It was just that, there's, it takes a while to make craft. You might get lucky and tell a story that has a particular kind of urgency and has its own shape that falls out, but then you have to keep on figuring out how to do that over and over again. John Patrick Shanley told me, sometimes you get a play that shows up like you just turn on the radio and it all just comes out and you can just write it down. And then you spend the next 10 years wondering, how do I write a play? I don't remember anymore because I just got this transmission that just showed up. And so craft is something that I think you just have to keep attending to over and over and over again. And I think experimentation is how you grow your craft. That's you discovering what is the edge that I have already reached in my own work, and how do I make myself an even better craftsperson? And it's through experimentation. So
never staying inside the box.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just, that's what's thrilling, right? It's just, do you want to do the same thing over and over again? No, you want to experiment. You want to try new things. And I feel, for example, in the Essentialisn't, which you just got to see, that I was really asking myself these really hard questions of letting go of what it was that I know so very well about performance and about structure, and in a very kind of punk rock way, resisting that and saying, I'm not going to do that. I know how to do it. I'm not going to do it, because it actually is part of the way that this kind of confinement or this kind of enclosure or imprisonment is happening, is that I feel I have to do these things that work. Let me try something that may not work, or I'm saying I'm going to do something that doesn't work on purpose, and just see where I show up, And I think about the Debate Society, about Hannah Boss and Paul Tureen, and I just said Tureen, but Thureen, thank you.
Yeah.
Hannah Boss, Paul Thureen, not a tureen where you just are going to dip, your ladle in some gravy.
Although it's a good metaphor.
It is, right? So yes, those beloved, wonderful, wonderful artists. And I remember doing an exercise with them at the Third Bohemia that Todd London had organized. They asked all of us there to make a bad play. So we were all grouped up in, groups of maybe 4 or something. And each of us were tasked in 20 minutes to make a really bad play. And the thing is that the bad plays actually weren't that bad. Like, it was really hard to make a bad play because it's already baked into us, how to do it well. And what it was,
though, we do somehow manage to do bad plays. Nonetheless.
It's so true.
Even when we're not trying.
Well, maybe trying it and doing it intentionally, what it did was it actually freed us.
Yes.
And so that is just the idea, I think, around experimentation, is that if you just let go of trying to perform well or trying to make something good and say, okay, let me put that aside, then things can fall out and show up that never would have, and that kind of experimentation is just thrilling.
Yeah. You were part of an experiment.
Yes.
At PSNY.
Yes.
Around COVID, and the artists were given the keys, as it were, the control
Actual
of the money,
keys.
the control of the money, though, and the staff, and the way that it was going to work. So what worked about that and what didn't?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought that, coming out of 2020 and all of the demands from We See You, there was a real desire to just have the institutional resources without any of the entanglement from, what those cultural forms and binds might be. And so it was great because you said the keys. We had the keys to go into the building. Mm-hmm. We had our budget. And we had our infrastructure that was there, that the PS provided. So yeah, Jenny Schlenska, Andy Sowers, who is the technical director, and everybody else on the staff were just really incredible at just nurturing whatever it was that we wanted to do. And it was really wonderful because not only did we get to make something that was a safe experience during COVID, it was just really right on the edge of people starting to gather and coming together. Like, we didn't have live theater until around September 21. That was indoors. So what we got to do with Afrofeminonomy at Performance Space New York was to have these very small amount of people in a huge space and then all of these outdoor shows that were in all over the city, so that was actually a highlight of the work that I've gotten to do in New York and period, because I got to be with all of these incredible artists and also to celebrate Kathleen Collins, who she's a literary foremother and someone who also really pushed against what those notions of Black womanhood meant, and wasn't able to have all of her work done and celebrated in her lifetime because of dying prematurely of cancer, at 46.
Wow.
And so I think what we wanted to do was to say that the work that we make as these interdisciplinary Black femme artists, we want to be able to celebrate this right now in the shadow of all of the death, the shadow of the death of these foremothers and also everything that we were experiencing during COVID and in 2020 in that reckoning and in all of the many reckonings and historical moments of upheaval, I want to say, and unrest. Put those together, uprest. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool, what is that?
That'd be a good title to
I know,
a play.
Uprest.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
I'll watch for it to come in the future. So has that led you to still be thinking about ways that are truly sustainable for us to thrive as artists, as people?
You mean trying to have that model?
Yeah, that model.
Yeah. I love that model. I really do. I mean, I think that, what's sustainable for us is always a work in progress, right? Because we just keep having new circumstances and we just have to keep finding ways to make sense of and take care of ourselves and each other as artists. So I really love that model, and I think it's still something that we can use right now.
Is there something else that you would change about the way institutions are operating?
I mean, wow, of course.
Yes.
But I think that, a lot of the, when I said, the demands from We See You, a lot of those things I think they were heard. I think there was backlash and ignoring of them, but I think ultimately things have started to move, I hope, in the direction of really helping artists to do what it is that they need. I mean, I think that that's really it. It's just being artist-centered. And of course, you want to be audience-centered as well. But finding places where those come together without the incursion, I guess, of capitalist models, you know.
Right.
I think that's the tough thing, you know, that everyone is trying to figure out in their own different way. But yeah, I mean, it's, and I also just want to give props to institutions for hanging on, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's hard to keep them going. It's hard to run them. And
It's certainly hard to fundraise for
it's
them.
hard to fundraise for them. So yeah, I just recognize that there's a great value in having institutions, and there's also great value in continuing to challenge the way that the institutions are run, both from the inside and also from the outside, and just being able to hold all of those things as you're developing new ways of engaging is really all you can do.
I read a thing that you quoted from Cornelius Eady that said, you can make your art do anything as long as the instructions to the audience are clear. So how do you think about those instructions to the audience in your own work?
Yeah, I'm glad you found that, because Cornelius Eady, who's one of the founders of Cave Canem, which is this incredible home for Black poetry that he founded with Toy Derricott, and I've been a fellow there. I guess I first joined them in 1999, but have still, you know, been, like, once you're part of Cave Canem, you always are, unless, I guess, you decide you never heard of them. But I would never do that, because they have changed the landscape of poetry, both in the country and also internationally. And yeah, Cornelius, who also has made theater. I don't know if you remember Running Man.
We did Running Man at
You
here.
did Running Man at here?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I only knew that it was at the Vineyard. Did it go from
it transferred
here to
from here to the Vineyard?
Oh, so I never got to see it. I
Yeah.
only got to read it. That's so cool.
Yeah, we did the original production.
I had no
Diane
idea.
Paulus directed the original production.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Deirdre did the music there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Music Theater Group was the producer.
Okay.
And here was a supporting institution on it.
I didn't know that genealogy. Hey, that's super cool. Okay. So you know Cornelius well.
Yeah.
So that was something he said to us in a poetry workshop. He just said, you can make anything you want as long as the instructions for receiving the poem, in this case, are inside the poem. And that has stayed with me always, because I think that is a principle that we can rely on for all art making, is that you just need to make the work legible, available to those who are receiving it, to an audience, to a reader, etc. And that's something I always try to do. Some people talk about it as setting the table, but setting the table sometimes is only around content. I think instructions for receiving the piece is more about form.
I feel like you taught us how to watch the play, the most recent play. You taught us how to watch it as we were watching it. Because you were changing your relationship to us. And so we were learning. We didn't feel lost. We felt like we knew where you were taking us. We trusted you as the person taking us on the journey.
That's great. Good. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I think that it's different in every piece. You know, the instructions are going to be different because each of the pieces are different. Again, if you're experimenting and trying new things. And yeah, I love that, you know, you can break what the expectations are as long as you say, here are the new ones.
Yeah. That's true. And they feel it, but they feel if you don't take them, they feel betrayed.
Yeah.
So that you need to take them on the journey, or they feel like they don't know where they are.
Yeah. And then sometimes you do want folks to feel disoriented or lost, but you also want people to feel that that's okay. So even that, I think, is, you know, or you're only going to allow people to feel lost for a certain amount of time before you give them another tent pole, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Do you think that spirit of experimentation, that spirit of like, try this, try this, that spirit of downtown, do you think that it still exists right now in our New York City of 2025?
I mean, I think it has to. I think, of course, I mean, I just think it's a human desire. So it has to be there. I haven't seen everything right now. Like I haven't, I just think back with joy at when I was on the Obie selection committee and I got to see everything. Ooh, that was fun. There were just so many things that I got to see that I,
wouldn't normally go to see. Yeah, I had the same experience when I was on the committee.
And actually, I remember seeing machines at here, and I wouldn't have seen it, I don't think. And that was just one of my favorite shows that year. It was so great,
You laughed so hard. You could barely stay in your chair. Yes.
It was so great. Yes. So yeah, I mean, I know that, again, when we're talking about institutions and institutional support, and also what are the desires that people have, and just economic exigencies. I think obviously space is really tough to come by. When I first came to New York, all of my friends, were just making things because you could just go into a basement and do that. Mm-hmm. And that's harder. That's harder now. You can still do it. And it's just about having that urgency. I just saw a really great production this weekend that it was actually a production of The Wolves that I guess she was my associate on The Essentialisn't, and I'm trying to think how old she is. I want to say she's 23 maybe. But yeah, she was like, I don't know where we're going to do this. We need to be able to kick soccer balls around. And, we have this cast and I was just like, okay, just keep looking around different community centers and churches. There's just like so many churches that, have empty gathering spaces. And that's where she ended up doing it.
Fantastic.
It's just like this church that I think had just walked by tons and tons of times in Midtown. And then there's a really great space, really great theater space, in it that I'd never seen before. So I think it's just, I know that desire is there. And it's just, it might be that the space and the funding is harder to come by than it once was. So it might mean that there is less of the pieces and the performances and shows, but I think that they're all still there.
Yeah. And for you right now, how do you define success? And has that changed as you've continued to work in the field?
What is success? I've asked myself that like so many different times. And I think it does change. It changes all the time. I think my idea of success right now is just being able to continue to do my work, and to have institutions, spaces support that sharing. This is a kind of a big season for me in being able to have the Essentialisn't this fall, and then in the spring I'll have a play at the Vineyard, a new play. And this is actually probably going to be the biggest production that I've ever had in New York. I've been working a long time, but have not had that many productions. And so there are many times when I felt, oh yeah, I'm a complete failure. Not so
true.
But you feel this way, right?
I know, you do.
And it's
a vulnerability of putting yourself out there as an artist.
Yes. And so people are surprised when I say that, when we did the Essentialism and then, doing this play at the Vineyard, I haven't had a play of mine that wasn't a collaboration like we did with Trade Practices in 2014. Just a play that was my own piece done since 2009.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a long time.
That's a long time for the field not to be recognizing all that you bring. That's really
yeah, and that's that's in New York, you know. So
and,
there have been plays in other places,
right?
But just like I said, the level of production that we'll be able to have at the Vineyard is something that I've never had in New York.
That's fantastic. We've waited too long for that, for sure. What would a sustainable artistic life for you look like?
Well, I think it goes to what I want for everyone, which is a universal basic income. That's just something we need.
Absolutely.
It's just something we need, and we can do it. We can do it.
We've tried it.
Yeah.
We had it in New York for 18 months for a group of artists. They've done it in Seattle. They've done it in San Francisco. They do it in Ireland all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Healthcare too.
Of course.
That doesn't belong to your employer, but belongs to you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what we all need as human beings. We need that. It's just like, that's what, it's not about a safety net. It's about, actually having the means to grow and thrive. It's not just, we'll catch you when you fall, but, let's just hook you up from the get.
Yes.
It's just that we're not siloed. We're part of ecosystems, and to just continue to see how it is that we can do actual work with one another to help each other out. We have this incoming mayor that has given so many of us so much hope and just, yes, a little bit of relief, just a touch, right? And we need it so badly because we're in this phase of incredible destruction, cruelty for cruelty's sake. Yes, greed and inhumanity. And so I think just continuing to build these bonds with each other. I think people have obviously become more and more atomized. That's what happens in urbanization, period. And then that's, of course, what's been happening with our tech experience and then our social media experience, is that people lose the ability, it kind of, the ability to just be with each other in person just starts to atrophy, and those nerve endings start to feel like, oh, I'm not doing this very much, so let me just do the thing I'm used to doing, which is just sitting by myself in my apartment interacting with a screen. And if there's just a way that we can keep on feeling each other in real time and real space, I know that we'll feel better. And we will have conflict that actually will be healthy and be another way that we build our craft and experimentation. Yeah. So yeah, I know it feels really, really scary and tough for especially those of us who are already introverts, like I have that in me, to just be like, let's try something. Let's try something. I have this idea. What do you think?
Thank you for that. That's a beautiful way to end.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Eisa,
for
this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Cool.
And thanks to HowlRound for hosting us and to you for joining us. And please come back to check out more of Torches.